people like Barney Frank decided home ownership needs even more encouragement than before. So let's lean on Fannie and Freddie to buy mortgages and bundle them for resale. Let's jawbone the banks to make mortgages to people who probably don't represent good credit risk, so the ability to pay it back. We had federal policy jamming that down the economy's throat, and easy money at the Fed carrying along for a time. The Fed shifted its policy, if you recall, it was 2 years or more ago, when the Fed went from accommodationist policy to contractionary, began to jack up interest rates. That was a clear sign that the balloon was off the rose, and then we had a stampede after Bear Stearns in the spring. But those two things are largely the culprits of the collapse. The easy money of the Fed for too long, and the long-standing policy of jawboning banks and mortgage institutions to make loans they shouldn't have for political purposes.
Yeah, what do you see as the net effect of the Glass-Steagall Act also, and it's rescinded, when it rescinded 10 years ago?
Yeah, Glass-Steagall, getting rid of it in what, the late 90s, I think, allowing for commercial and investment banks to sort of become one in effect. I don't think that the effect, I think the effects of that are vastly overstated. I don't see that as a major culprit. I think that was a move to accommodate what markets were trying to get done. I don't think that was so much.
How about the passage? Was it 36 or 30?
Oh yeah, it was bad news back then. It should have been passed. It helped to delay recovery at that time.
Let's do one more question.
Yes.
Do you have, if you get rid of the Fed?
I'm sorry?
If you get rid of the Fed, I mean, let's say it was an evil, bad idea. The panic in 1907 was an aberration. We shouldn't have reacted that way. What's your idea? Just go back to Congress to coin your own money?
That's a very good question. I don't like to play the role of central planner, so I don't have a grand plan that says, here's how to do it step by step. I think there needs to be a lot of work on that. I can tell you this, though, that real monetary reform has to involve mechanisms that will put the market in charge of money instead of the whims of politicians. Now, what might that look like? I can suggest a number of ways. I'm not sure what might be the best way to do it. First of all, whatever you do with monetary policy, even if you were to restore gold convertibility, let's say, will not last long if the government doesn't get its fiscal house in order. If the government announced tomorrow, we're going to back the dollar with gold, I would say, well, hey, good move. But if it still had $1.5 trillion deficits, I would say, I don't believe you. It's only a matter of time before you go off it again. So the government first has to exert fiscal discipline itself before you can make a step toward real monetary reform and stability. Personally, I'm very friendly to the gold standard, and I think it served us well. And it was when government began to adulterate it and move us away from it that we opened the door to this mischief of inflation. So I'm friendly to the notion of tying the dollar once again to gold. How to get there, I don't know precisely, but there's a good example from our history. In 1875, Congress passed a law that could be a model for us today. We had had inflation in both the North and the South. You know, in the South, of course, they had hyperinflation. They lost the war, money became worthless, but they also printed way too much of it. In the North, we had the greenbacks. So the dollar was in tatters by the early 1870s. In 1875, Congress passed a law that said, beginning on the 1st of January, 1879, all the greenbacks we've issued will be redeemable at par in gold. They gave themselves 4 years to make sure gold reserves were sufficient. And they said, at that point, you can bring your greenbacks in, and we'll finally redeem them for what we promised. On that redemption day in 1879, hardly anybody went to the banks and said, give me gold for my paper. The reason was, people had good reason to have confidence. They said, we believe them. We know the reserves are there. We'd rather use the paper if we know that it's as good as gold, and we can get it if we want to. Something like that, I think, should be part of the discussion. But we have to get away from this undisciplined approach where the supply of money is utterly at the whims of undisciplined, spendthrift politicians and their appointees. That's a prescription for disaster.